Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for this invitation to come speak this morning. It's quite an honor for me. This church is very special to me. As Brother Don stated this morning, this church isn't the church, it's the people within. But we tend to put things on fleshly existence, and this is really where my Christianity started. Initially, those of you know me, I only came here just to be with that little redhead that I wanted to spend as much time with as possible. But Mr. Bernhardt's words started to prick my heart. It was some of my first experiences that brought me to Christianity. I also know that this is an extended church family for me, and as my family goes through trials, I know that your prayers are with me. My daughter being sick this year, myself being sick, I really appreciate your prayers, and it makes you feel very comfortable when you speak among fellow believers. I appreciate Don reading 2 Timothy. That's what I'm going to speak from today. And we're going to look at endurance. In this scripture setting, the Apostle Paul was chained in a Roman prison. He is facing death, and you might say that he is writing his famous last words to his favorite son, Timothy. He was passing the torch of leadership on, encouraging him as an evangelism, and making him realize that he was going to face difficult times. And he uses the qualities of a soldier, an athlete, and a farmer. I'm going to take a look at each one of those this morning. And even though these verses are nearly 2,000 years old, I think they're still very sharp in our life application. As I was going through and studying, I found a little story talking about struggles and endurance. None of us like to really go through struggles and trials, and at times it's very hard for us to understand why they're happening. I have a good friend in the church, Brother Russ. He's from West Virginia, and he often says that it's hard for him to praise God when his thumb's stuck in the door. And when we're going through these difficult times, it's tough for us to really see how God is shaping us. But I found this story that I think kind of helps us. It's called The Struggle That Makes Us Strong. A man found a cocoon of a butterfly one day, and a small opening appeared. He sat and watched the butterfly for several hours as it struggled to force its body through that tiny little hole. Then it seemed to stop making any progress. It appeared that it had gotten as far as it could, and it could go no further. So the man decided to help the butterfly. He took a pair of scissors and snipped off the remaining bit of the cocoon. The butterfly then emerged easily, but it had a swollen body and a small, shriveled set of wings. The man continued to watch the butterfly because he expected at any moment the wings would enlarge and expand and he'd be able to support his body, which would contract in time. Neither happened. In fact, the butterfly spent the rest of its life crawling along with a swollen body and shriveled wings. It was never able to fly. What the man, in his kindness and haste, did not understand was that the restricted cocoon and the struggle required for the butterfly to get through the tiny openings were God's way of forcing the fluid from the body of the butterfly into its wings so that it would be ready for flight, and once it had achieved its freedom from the cocoon. Sometimes struggles are exactly what we need in our lives. If God allowed us to go through our lives without any obstacles, it would cripple us. We would not be as strong as we could be, and we could never fly. I asked for strength, and God gave me difficulties to make me strong. I asked for wisdom, and God gave me problems to solve. I asked for prosperity, and God gave me a brain to do work. I asked for courage, and God gave me danger to overcome. I asked for love, He gave me troubled people to help. I asked for favors, and God gave me opportunities. I received nothing I wanted, but I received everything that I needed. I think, again, when we're looking at the trials, we don't see really how they shaped us until years down the line. And this morning, when we look at Paul's lesson here, we'll first start off talking about the soldier. Now, many of you have served our country, and we've already talked about many of you may have lost people this weekend. We are, memorializing them, and if you've served the country, or if you had family serving, you know how difficult it is a job as a soldier, and what they do for us and what it means for our country. I read a book last year called Unbroken. I don't know if any of you have actually read it, but it actually really helped me take a look at enduring. It's about Louis Zamperini. He was a World War II veteran. He started off, he was an Olympic runner, and before he actually enlisted, he was getting ready to compete in the Olympics. But he enlisted to fight in the war. He was a gunman on the B-24, which those of you that follow, I'm sure my father-in-law knows this, but it was the B-17 Sister, and they called it the Flying Brick. It was not a great vessel to fly on, he said. He actually went down in the Pacific when they were shot down, and he spent 47 days surviving on a life raft. And reading through the book, it's just amazing how he was able to endure. Everyone in the life raft didn't make it. He had to pretend he was dead at times when the Japanese were going over, and they would try to shoot it at any soldiers they saw that they thought may have survived. They had to get fish, or they had to try to make sure the sharks weren't going to eat them. And then after that, they actually were able to be saved, but they were saved on Japan, and they were put into a prison camp. And the things that he endured for 2 years, it really taught me something about endurance, what he went through. Long-suffering, in verse 3, endure hardship with us like a good soldier of Christ Jesus. We know soldiers endure great hardship, when they're serving for our country, not just the physical things that they go through, but the danger they're putting themselves in and what they are giving up, their family time, the missed holidays, the missed births, the things that they go through, for us, is enduring those hardships. Should we be any less willing to suffer those hardships? We see in Matthew 5, verses 10 through 12, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is in the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were with you, who were there before you. Trials are going to strengthen our faith. And the fact that we're persecuting means that we're being faithful. If we're going through life and we are not being persecuted, then possibly we're not taking our walk the way that we should. We took our youth down to Winterfest in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and it's just a great opportunity to hear different speakers and to have thousands of young Christians together. But one speaker gave an example where everyone in the audience got a flashlight, and they talked about the light, and the light isn't actually you, it's the reflection of Jesus off of you. And each student had a light, and they turned off the lights in this auditorium, and one by one they had the rows shine a light. And then when we went back to our room for our Devo at night, each child had a flashlight, and what we're supposed to do is have them shine the light, not just shine the light where it was easy, but shine the light like under the sofa that was in there, under the bed, reflecting Jesus' light in the dark places. And we know when we reflect that light in dark places, we're not always going to be accepted. And we're going to face these trials, and we're going to face, persecution. But that's what we're supposed to do. And we're supposed to be able to endure that. But these trials are going to strengthen our faith. In verse 4, it talks about being focused. No one serving as a soldier of Christ gets involved in civilian affairs. Soldiers must concentrate on the task at hand to survive. Kind of looking at this of singleness of purpose. My background in sports, and that is a term that Vince Lombardi often used. My wife did not like singleness of purpose when I was head football coach because she called it one-track mind. But we should have that singleness of purpose, and we should be able to keep focused on what our job is. Regardless of the situation, to keep at the task at hand. Christians need to be careful not to be distracted by the world. Examining the parable of the 4 soils in Luke 8:14. The seed that fell among thorns stands for those who hear, but if they go their way, they are choked out by life's worries, riches, and pleasures, and they do not mature. Stay focused on the task. Jesus teaches us that not all seeds fall on the good soil. The third point with the soldier is devoted. And we know that how devoted soldiers are to their job and how devoted they are to our country. And a good soldier wants to please his commanding officer. And I think of that movie, I think it's White Christmas by Irving Berlin, where the general buys the ski resort up in Vermont, and then there's no snow. And I think it's Bing Crosby brings all the men that served for him for years, and they come up trying to save him. But because the leader that man was, they wanted to be able to help him. Another good example is like with your children. Your children want to please you, regardless. Sometimes as parents we look at things and we don't quite look at it the way that we should be, because these children want nothing more than please you, even in difficult times when you think that you don't. They are trying to please you. Should our actions be done any less to please our great commander? In 2 Corinthians 5:9, so make it our goal to please him, whether we are at home, with the body, or away from it. All of our actions should be based on pleasing God, regardless of the company or our location. It's so easy for us to, reflect our light within this building. We all have the common themes of the common walk that we're trying to walk. It's harder. It's harder when we're in the workplace. It's harder for our teens when they're in our schools. We still should have that same, be the same person in all situations. The next analogy he uses is the athlete. And the athlete is disciplined and they believe when no one else does. I can think of several examples here that come to heart. If you look at the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, I was just a young boy and I grew up playing hockey. I can remember being a pee-wee player and all of us, being just glued to the TV at what these boys were actually doing. And now it's been Disneyized, if you want to put it that way, with the movie. But really, what they actually did was quite amazing. It would be like our high school hockey team beating the NHL All-Stars. It was a group of boys playing against professional men from the Soviet Union. And no one else believed. In fact, they didn't believe up to probably 2 weeks away because the Russians beat them 10-2 at Madison Square Garden. It was an embarrassment. And we were written off at that point. The Russians had beat our NHL All-Stars, who was supposed to be, the best. They beat them like 6-2. And what those boys did, continuing to believe, is amazing. Another example would be Jesse Owens in the 1936 Olympics. When Nazi hated him, everyone was rooting against him. And for him to be able to, win 4 gold medals in that situation, with him, with the hatred, him just believing when no one else did. Or even Francis Ouimet, who won the U.S. Open in 1913, who was just an amateur that, against his hero, Harry Vardon and Ted Ray, who were the huge favorites in the sport. No one even knew Francis Ouimet. He wasn't even playing golf at the time. Another one that was Disneyized, but if you want to put it that way. But those are examples of believing when no one else does. An athlete is obedient. In verse 5, athletes need to abide by the rules if they desire to win. Are we as Christians any less obligation to follow the rules? In Matthew 28:20, teach them to obey everything I have commanded to you, and surely I am always with you to the very end. Our rules are clearly laid out for us. We know what we have to do. We must be doers of the word, and not simply hearers of the word. If we look in Matthew 7:21-27, not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father, and who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? And in your name drive out demons, perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. If the rain came down and the streams rose and the winds blew against the house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and who does not put them into practice is like the foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the wind blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. Jesus is truly concerned with our walk. He's not concerned with our talk. It's not just what we profess to do, but it's what we actually do, and it's based upon our true relationship with Him. The next point he looks at is being self-controlled. And maybe many of you weren't athletes, but I think most of us in here have had some kind of goal that we've tried to reach, whether it be a diet or whether it be exercising, and it's difficult. It's difficult to keep yourself on that regime, or it's difficult to practice that self-control. Athletes know, ultimately, if they're going to reach their goals, they need to stay on these tasks, and it requires great self-control. Should Christians exercise the same self-control? We see in 1 Corinthians 9:24-27, and we know that sports were there at the time. We don't have to talk about it, but this verse here is looking at the famous Isthmian games that were in Corinth, as Paul's talking about this here. Do you know that in a race that all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes through strict training. They do it to get the crown that will not last. But we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore I do not run like a man aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating on air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. He's talking about several things here. He's encouraging Timothy here to train diligently, train himself to run eagerly towards the goal. Okay, he's also talking about the crown, where their crown is something that was going to perish. Okay, I think it would be like greens is what their crown was made of. Okay, but we know that his reward that was at the end of the race for him is not going to perish. He's looking at like a shadow boxer. And as I studied this thing, he was using an analogy also of putting forth meaning behind his words and using his words towards getting towards his goal. And where he's talking about not being disqualified, okay, he was going to get his prize, and he was going to work through, and he was going to, continue his good works regardless. And the last analogy that we look at is the farmer. Now, farmers are hardworking. I did not grow up as a farmer. Probably several of you may have. I know there's some people in here, farmers in your family. I was able to actually experience the farmer life for one day. I had a good friend that was teaching with Michelle and I. His name was Lenny and Becky, and they had a farm in Pennsylvania, a dairy farm. So on the way back up to New York, we decided to visit them at one point. Lenny asked me if I wanted to go through and work with him for the day. Sure. So Lenny gets me up 4 o'clock in the morning in January. We milk the cows. And after we're done milking the cows, we are going out and we're spreading the manure from the barn in the field when it's 10 degrees and the wind's blowing, and went through all the work, and then we had to do all that again. And I find out it's 4 and 4, 5 and 5, 6 and 6, however you're going to do it, but they're hard working. Okay, and I found that firsthand. It's no easy task. The hours that are involved with it, the physical work, okay, it's just really, you're very dedicated. So as Christians, should we put any less labor, okay, in our work that we're putting forth for the Lord? In Matthew 9:37 through 38, it says, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out the workers into the harvest field." Jesus knew that he was going to need workers to continue on his work. We know within the church that we need workers to continue on the work. We know that we've all been given different talents. I think sometimes we make the mistake of trying to force different people into different talents. We need to use the talents that, God has given us. Some have the ability to speak. Some have the ability to come up in front and lead prayers and to spread the word. Some, we have great ladies that are teachers. We have people that are encouragers. People that can do the work within the church, like Brother Don talked about, mowing the lawn or building things for the church. Okay, whatever talent God's given us, we need to put forth and work. Okay, we need to, God answers our prayers, okay, by using us. Be prepared for God to show to you, okay, the way that he's working within you. We know that farmers are motivated. Okay, it's the hardworking farmer who should enjoy the benefit of the labors first. Do we as Christians have motivation to work diligently? It should be easy for us. We see in 1 Corinthians 15:58, "Therefore, my dear brothers, stand, let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the Lord, because you should know that your labor is not in vain." The fruit that we gather relates to eternal life. Okay, and souls are at stake. What other motivation should we need than to reach out and continue to let our light, God's light, shine off of us? At the same time, we need to maintain our perspective. We shouldn't be discouraged. Okay, we should continue to keep on working. I can use me as an example. Okay, the people within this church embraced me from the time I stepped in the doors. And it took a long time before I really figured it out. And if people gave up on me, if you didn't give me the encouragement whenever I came back and I still had not seen the way, okay, you can't be discouraged. There's going to be people that you're going to work with that you won't know the benefit you have in their life for years down the line. It doesn't mean that we should stop working. The farmer is like that. The farmer realizes the work that they put in, they're not going to see it maybe initially. They might not even see it this season. Okay, but they know that the work they're going to put in that's going to yield the fruits of their labor. Oftentimes also we may be discouraged, or possibly the world will change our perspective. We need to stay focused on the true task at hand. I found a nice little poem and it's called New Perspective. And oftentimes we can be clouded, okay, by worldly things and possibly running the race that everyone else is running, and us not truly seeing what our gifts are. One day, a very wealthy father took his son for a trip to the country for the sole purpose of showing his son just how it was to be poor. They spent a few days and nights on the farm of what would be considered a very poor family. After their return from the farm, the father asked his son, "Oh, how'd you like the trip?" "It was great, Dad," the son replied. Did you see how poor people can be?" the father asked. "Oh yeah," the son said. "So what did you learn from the trip?" the father asked. The son answered, "I saw that we have a dog, and they have 4. We have a pool that reaches to the middle of the garden, and they have a creek that has no end. We have imported lanterns that light our garden, and they have stars that light the whole night. Our patio reaches to the front yard, and they have the whole horizon. We have a small piece of land to live on, and they have fields that go on beyond our sight. We have servants who serve us, but they serve others. We buy our food, and they grow theirs. We have walls around our property to protect us. They have friends to protect them." The boy's father was speechless. Then the son added, "It showed me just how poor we are. Too many times we forget that what we have, and we concentrate on what we don't have. What is one person's worthless object is another person's prized possession. It's all based on the perspective." So as we're doing our good works, and we're focusing, okay, we need to have the patience to be able to reflect back on the perspective on what we truly have, and the blessings that the good Lord has given each one of us. And regardless of what the world is telling us to do, we need to keep that perspective, okay, and not lose it and be warped by worldly things. Concluding from these 3 pictures of the faithful servants, we should strive to be dedicated like the soldier, disciplined like the athlete, and a diligent worker like the farmer. And like Brother Zach talked about at the nursing home, the lady liking the song, I walk in the garden alone, which is a beautiful song. And I know that for me, I can't get through the song without getting chills, thinking about that experience of being together with Jesus. So this morning, if you have not yet had that experience, if you don't know Jesus, or if you need the prayers from the church, you just need someone to study with you,